I'm glad for everybody to be present at my speech. And I'm hoping that there's something we can learn from this and pray that it's a good experience. In May 9th, 2013, the opera group decided that they were going to do a rendition of an opera done by German composer Richard Wagner. He wrote it as medieval Germany, but the opera troupe changed it to where it was a concentration camp, including the physical cruelty and the gas chambers and other things that were from World War II. The guests and the audience were so thoroughly disgusted that they had to seek medical attention afterwards. We have watched the news and noticed the rise in the cruelties and the fluency of many of the crimes in our area and within America. We've seen and even been amazed at how terribly one person can do against another. But as the days go on, we have become what may seem to be accustomed to these cruelties. Is there something that has been changed over the years that may promote this increase? Can this change be from a basic adaptation of the human perceptive? While returning from a makeshift break room for security personnel and the patrol officers that were present, I waved at 2 patrol officers that were passing me by. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and the location was in the Bay Area of the Caloosahatchee River, going into Fort Myers, Florida. We were there to protect millions of dollars of yachts and boats for the Fort Myers Yacht Club. As I neared the corner of the building, a shadow blurred past me, yelled at the police, and then fled on foot through the puzzles of boats that were on their trailers. The 3 of us gave chase. Soon 2 more security officers joined us, and the police backup was called. Flashlights were waving everywhere, trying to find this perpetrator, especially before he could damage anyone's $100,000 boat. Some of them even more pricey. It took an innovation of my own to just turn off my flashlight and walk through these boats trying to find this person. When I spotted a shadow, it wound up being underneath the $250,000 fishing boat designed for open waters. I yelled out, the shadow took off in the opposite direction. The 2 patrol officers just happened to be near that area where he was heading towards, and they yelled him to stop. The gentleman turned just slightly and jumped over an 8-foot fence. When he did this, just coincidentally, the police backup had arrived. But they were still too far away, but because of where they were at, the gentleman realized his only exit was going into the river. Of course, he'd have to jump through the mangroves, which the mangroves are plants that grow on the edge of the rivers and can rise 8 to 10 feet up in the air. Just as he was trying to work his way through the mangroves, a police officer reaches out and grabs him by the shirt and pulls him back. First thing the police officer said was, "Don't you know that there could be snakes in there?" We start taking our flashlights, looking around the mangroves, wondering, were we too close? When he was asked as to why he did this, he simply said, "Because I wanted to." The police officer said, "Don't you see the gates, the fences, and the security?" He figured it was just a challenge to run through them. And he simply asked, "Can I go now?" The police officer said, "No, because we don't want to." Well, we look at our crimes today, and a lot of it is because of people who just want to do what they want. When we consider the religious forms and the ideas of our fathers, no longer adequate. The quest for the good life is still a central task for mankind. Man is at last becoming aware that he is alone responsible for the realization of the world of his dreams, that he has within himself power for its achievement. He must set intelligence and will to the task. This is from the New Humanist, put out by the American Humanist Association, written by Claudia McLaus. The young man used his intelligence and used his will to empower himself to set his dreams, and was attempting to achieve his task of simply running through the property, but it was not productive. It only accomplished 14 days in jail awaiting court, and thereafter he received 60 more days for criminal trespassing and disorderly conduct. Within the 10 points of humanism written by Corliss Lamont in the Philosophy of Humanism, there is no belief in the supernatural. He even points out that we are a product of evolution. We can solve out our own problems. Each person can shape their own destiny. He points that our own experiences can lead us to our own worldly happiness and freedom. We can gain the good life through personal satisfaction and personal development. The existence of the far-reaching social programs, he also adds the new freedom of full freedom of expression and civil liberties. I must admit that this is not a complete explanation of each point, but I try to keep them as keep within their philosophical views. I can really see their good intentions within these points, but from my experiences, these simple points for humanism can be distorted very easily for encouraging criminal activity, and becomes a root for their beliefs stemming from Darwin's explanation of evolution, where the idea is that man evolved from monkeys and apes. How can the value of life be declined with this point of view? Does it affect each of us in saying that God created man in his own image? Or does it make us feel better to be told that we are descended from monkeys? A daughter approached her mother and asked, "Mommy, where did we come from?" The mother answered that we were created by God in his own image. She noticed that the young girl looked troubled and confused. The mother asked her if something was wrong. She said, "Well, Daddy just said that we came from monkeys." Mom looked at her and said, "Sweetheart, we were made in God's image. It's just Daddy was talking about his side of the family." With Darwin's survival of the fittest, Adolf Hitler was armed with the theory of Charles Darwin, and that the humanist view was set for his intelligence and will to perform the task that he had achieved his dreams. Robert Richards from the University of Chicago, he mentions the first factual issue to tackle is, did Hitler embrace Darwinism? The question, however, needs to be made more exact. What features of Darwin's theory did he embrace, if any? Concerning the theory especially, as applied to human beings, we are discriminate in three components. First, the human groups can be arranged in a racial hierarchy, from less advanced to more advanced. That species have undergone descent with modifications over vast stretches of time, and that human beings descended from ape-like ancestors. And three, that natural selection is a principal device to explain species transitions. Now the question become, did Hitler adopt any of these positions, and were they derived ultimately from Darwin? And did these ideas cause him to adapt or favor racism and specifically anti-Semitic views characteristic of Nazi theology. Of course, a positive answer to this latter question is essential to complete a causal connection between Darwinian theory and Hitler's lethal racial attitudes. Yet Mr. Richards felt that Hitler, though having influence of Darwin, was not particularly an evolutionist. However, he does admit that Hitler used the language that Darwin had to give a scientific pretense to his savagery. In the struggle for daily bread, all those who are weak and sickly, or less determined, suffer, while the struggle for the males for the females grants the right of opportunity to propagate only to the healthiest, and struggle is always a means for improving a species' health and power of resistance, and therefore a cause of higher development. David Klinghoffer, he writes, he praises the iron logic, that Hitler praises the iron logic of nature, with its right to victory of the best and stronger in the world. But that if the strong, which is referred to as the Aryans, chose not to dominate and exterminate the weak, which would be the Jews, this would be against nature, whose whole work of higher breeding, over perhaps hundreds of thousands of years, might be ruined with one blow. This comes from the evolutionnews.com. The value of human life decreases further and further without the belief of God and his hand in the creation. Colossians 1, 16 and 17, for by him were all things created, that in the heavens and that in the earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created by him and for him. And he is before all things, and by him all things consist. Describing the devaluation of life for the survival of the fittest in evolution, and the self wants to attain personal achievement in humanism, God places a value on life very high, unless you assume a God. The question of life's purpose is meaningless. And this was said by the well-known atheist Bertrand Russell. Each person is important to God. Albert Einstein had said, God doesn't roll dice. We sometimes act as if everything is by chance, but there is a purpose in all things. In Psalm 139, 15 through 17, the psalmist wrote, my frame is not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book, before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. We cannot deny that there is a failing in the value of life in our society today. We watch the news reports of more frequent and increasing violent crimes. It seems that it has become a second thought. No effort to persuade to take a life. We've become nothing more than monkeys and apes killing off a weaker member of our species. With this idea in our philosophy of life, then ignoring the actions of a criminal, simply walking away, is nothing more than a group of monkeys sitting and eating while watching another getting beaten. God tells us in his word that each and every one of us is important to him. We are not identified with the monkeys, the apes, or even to the animal kingdom. We are identified as being made in his image. Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. I firmly stand with this belief that our lives have greater value than what God wants us. There is a saying that has grown popular over the years. Why can't we just get along? This would be a good saying if Charles Darwin had not classified humans as monkeys. There is a video of them just standing, screaming, throwing stones, and even throwing sticks. How can we get along with each other if we're nothing more than animals? And the rulers of survival of the fittest apply. On the other hand, God loves us and has set us above the animals. We just have to act like it. Thank you.